Tomorrow marks the 13th anniversary of the most heinous and cowardly attack in the history of our nation, certainly a terrorist attack that took the lives of nearly 3,000 of our fellow Americans. And it happened in part because our visa security and border security defenses were not very effective. Among the most important weaknesses that the attackers were able to exploit was our porous outer ring of border security. In total, the 19 hijackers passed through the U.S. border security 68 times back and forth without being detected. And on that day in September, we learned a very hard lesson. As noted by the 9/11 Commission, I quote, "For terrorists, travel documents are as important as weapons," unquote. And I think that is a very, very important statement by them. It's so true. Many more terrorists since have exploited the visa system in one fashion or another, and it's an ongoing vulnerability, certainly one heightened by the significant growing threat that the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria pose to our nation. Our best estimates are that thousands of individuals carrying Western passports have joined in the fight in Syria and in Iraq, including several hundred Americans. Two innocent American journalists, James Foley and Stephen Sotloff, were brutally beheaded by an ISIS terrorist who was likely a British citizen. These thugs have no regard for life and have threatened to attack our homeland, and the United States government must be prepared to prevent such an act from happening. Terrorists with Western passports pose additional risk to the homeland because many are eligible for visa-free travel through the visa waiver program. Terrorists could be just one visa-free flight away from arriving in the United States, bringing with them their skills and their training and their ideology and their commitment to killing Americans, all of these things that they've learned overseas. Let us remember that Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker, actually traveled on the visa waiver program before he enrolled in a Minneapolis flight school. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, who tried to ignite explosives in his shoe, also traveled on the visa waiver program. And Ramzi Youssef, who was one of the main perpetrators of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, again used the visa waiver program to enter the country. These attacks occurred before the advent of increased scrutiny on the visa waiver countries. And while I think we are confident that we can identify many threats today through the electronic system for travel authorization, commonly called ESTA, we'll be talking about ESTA quite a bit in our hearing today, which all visa waiver applicants have to fill out, it is clear that we may have trouble determining if some individuals have traveled to terrorist regions. And although CBP continuously vets all visa applicants against our terrorism holdings, that information is imperfect if we do not have a complete picture of an individual's travel route. Collecting more information up front could be very, very helpful for us to do just that. Patriot and other pilot programs that look at the totality of data on an ESTA and a visa application are certainly good tools to help close some of our intelligence gaps and make connections that we would otherwise miss. However, critical information sharing, especially with our European allies, is critical to help combat the threat of foreign fighters bound for the United States. And unfortunately, Europe as a whole has been reluctant to share certain passenger name record data, or PNR data, as we call it, with the United States. And such a gap certainly puts our citizens in the United States at risk. I want to commend our allies in the United Kingdom, who have been quick to realize the severity of the threat, especially as many Brits are among the ISIS fighters. We must work with our foreign allies, like the United Kingdom, and others to quickly identify those radicalized by ISIS and similar groups and prevent them from traveling to the United States. And like the UK, I also think we should be looking at the authority that we have, or we may need, and that will be a big part of our discussion here this morning, to revoke passports of American citizens who go to fight in ISIS. We need to reduce their ability to travel to the United States, and I think we need to consider what it will take to strip passports from those who provide support to or fight with terrorists. I certainly look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on what further changes we have made in our visa security system to combat the threat of foreign fighters who travel often overland through neighboring Turkey's porous border, into Syria and into Iraq before returning home to Europe. And it might be hard for many Americans to comprehend, but for many in Europe, traveling to Syria is as simple as just getting in their car and driving there. Today's hearing is really about one simple question. Can the United States government adequately detect terrorist travel patterns, identify suspicious movement, and prevent those who would do us harm from coming into the United States? How can we best protect our homeland? Our enemies are intent on attacking our country and are actively seeking to avoid our countermeasures. We need to be one step ahead instead of constantly reacting to their latest attack. Defeating terrorists' ability to move internationally has long been a focus area for this subcommittee. Terrorists who have plotted horrific attacks against us have crossed the U.S. border for training or fraudulently obtaining a student or a work visa. There are certainly further opportunities that we can take to prevent attacks and to limit terrorist mobility, and that is why we are holding this hearing today. Our visa security process obviously needs to be robust, and we must deny terrorists freedom of movement because 13 years ago we unfortunately saw what failure looked like. The Chair would now recognize the ranking minority member of this subcommittee, the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for her opening statement.